I just want to say before this video begins that this video features spoilers for Solo, a Star Wars story, Rogue One, a Star Wars story, The Last Jedi, The Force Awakens, Star Wars, Empire Strikes Back, Avengers, Captain America the First Avenger, and Captain America the Winter Soldier, and Avengers Infinity War. I think that's it. Okay. Solo, a Star Wars story, might be the best Disney Star Wars film, and I know that's a pretty weird statement. Vanity Fair reported that it is the biggest flop of any Star Wars film ever. And when it was first announced, I vocally groaned. And one, we don't need a origin story of Han Solo, and two, no one, I mean no one, can fill the shoes of Harrison Ford. And honestly, the first statement I stand by. But funny thing, I really like it. We didn't need this film, and according to the internet, the general consensus agrees with me. Why was this a thing, and why are you even trying to replace Harrison Ford? And that, combined with Disney's lackluster promotional campaign and releasing the film in May, when for the past 3 films Star Wars has been a December release, is probably what tanked it. If you haven't seen the film and you disagree with my opening statement, don't worry, I get that. And if you have seen the film and you still disagree with my opening statement, I also get that. But either way, I implore you to hear me out. Solo, a Star Wars story, might be the best Disney Star Wars film. And the reason why is because it's really, really simple. The plot beats, the narrative, the plot twists, the pacing, and the structure are all really simple, and so they all just work. It's a fun, action-packed romp through a fantastical universe full of interesting planets and even more interesting creatures, and it has a core message designed to tell a moral story to kids. If I were to guess, it would be that anyone can be a good guy, or crime don't pay, or Han Solo's awesome. It's probably the anyone can be a good guy thing. That seems like a wholesome message for kids. But do you know what that does remind me of? A certain other Star Wars film. You see, the original Star Wars film is a great film, but it's not a complex film. It doesn't have a huge amount of layers to it. The structure's pretty simple, and the narrative was pretty cliched even back when it was made. And that doesn't make it a bad film. Its central message of, if you're a good person and you have hope, then you can prevail over darkness, is one that anyone can understand and relate to. And that's not to say the film doesn't have deeper layers and deeper meaning, and as the trilogy continued, more layers and more meaning was added to the franchise. And although most people, myself included, would say that Empire Strikes Back is the best Star Wars film, I think the original is a close second, and with arguably better pacing. And Solo reflects that, and in many ways it does everything that the original Star Wars film did to make us fall in love with that universe. It's not as good, but that core quality is something that I haven't really felt in the other Disney Star Wars films yet. Because ultimately, storytelling has changed quite a lot since the original Star Wars film came out, particularly in filmmaking. Where the original Star Wars film is a clear-cut story of good versus evil, more recent films tend to have a greyish, murky morality to them. Take the biggest blockbuster of 2018, for example, Avengers Infinity War. The main villain, Thanos, is an evil tyrant hell-bent on killing half of the universe, but he has a fairly understandable reason for it. He's insane, but the filmmakers make us empathize with him. So, hey. And the 21st century way of storytelling is not universal, but it's something that the past 2 Star Wars films before Solo, I think, tried to do. Rogue One and The Last Jedi both try and frame themselves in this 21st century way of storytelling, They take pre-established organizations that embodied good and murky the waters a bit. In Rogue One, one of our main heroes, Cassian Andor, is a Rebel Alliance intelligence operative who kills an informant so that they can't squeal to the Empire. Later on, we're introduced to Saw Gerrera, who almost kills Bodhi Rook, an Imperial defector, during an interrogation. And both of these guys work with the Rebel Alliance, and both are supposed to be heroic, but both of them are actually just gritty, worn-down soldiers trying to do the best to win a bloody war. In The Last Jedi, Luke Skywalker almost cuts down his nephew while he sleeps out of fear that he might fall to the dark side. And later on, when we meet him in the present, he's become disillusioned with the way of the Jedi and the way of the Force. He feels disconnected and refuses to continue fighting for the light. What both of these films try and do is update the Star Wars universe to a 21st century way of storytelling. But what I think both of these fail to do is do that in a cohesive, well-paced way. And it can be done, because Disney already did it. Captain America, the First Avenger, is told in a very 20th century way of storytelling, despite it being released in 2011. We have a clear-cut good versus evil narrative between the Allied forces and Captain America, the good guys, and the Nazis and Hydra and the Red Skull, the bad guys. In the next film in the franchise, The Avengers, that released 1 year later, we still have a pretty clear-cut good versus evil narrative. The Avengers are definitively the good guys, and Loki and the Chitauri are categorically the bad guys. There is a brief segment in the film where S.H.I.E.L.D. is brought into question with them testing weapons powered by the Tesseract and wanting to nuke New York City, but for the most part they are viewed as the good guys. It's not until Captain America the Winter Soldier that things really get 21st centuryfied. Captain America is still categorically the good guy, but S.H.I.E.L.D. has been corrupted by Hydra, the bad guys, and Cap doesn't know who of his former comrades he can trust. On top of that, the main operative for Hydra, the Winter Soldier, is in fact Bucky, Captain America's childhood best friend, who's been corrupted to become evil. At the end of the film, Captain America doesn't defeat Bucky with his fists, but instead by his refusal to fight him and his belief that Bucky can be redeemed. And if that doesn't sound Star Wars as hell, I don't know what does. The film at its core, though, is an action-packed drama with good pacing and a bunch of good plot twists. And I feel like the recent Disney Star Wars films have failed to replicate this. And don't get me wrong, I've liked every single Disney Star Wars film, but I think they've all been flawed. The Force Awakens was initially criticized as being an almost carbon copy of the original Star Wars film, and I initially defended it, saying if the new trilogy ends up being unique and inventive, then who cares? I still like it, but it's aggressively middle tier when it comes to the Star Wars films, and the company it shares there, Revenge of the Sith and Return of the Jedi, both offer loads more in the form of rewatchability. Rogue One, I love what it tried to do, and I do think it did some things fantastically, but I had to Google the characters' names for the sake of this video, and that's not a good sign. Like, I love the glimpses at an ancient Jedi civilization on Jedha, and I love the Vader rampage at the end of the film, and wow, I never knew that Rebel armor looked so cool in torrential rain, and I've got some weird thing for cool guys and rain. But I don't think it sticks the landing, because they introduce a bunch of new characters to us and don't spend any time really fleshing them out. The narrative feels pretty jagged and rushed at times. We know a lot of the film was recut, and I'm curious to see how the original product looked. But ultimately, although I think it's ambitious and I like that darker side to the Star Wars universe, I don't think it sticks to the landing. In The Last Jedi, again, there's some cool moments and there's some cool ideas that they're throwing out, but, you know, I like the kind of questioning of the Jedi Order, but I have high expectations for what that should be after the likes of Knights of the Old Republic 2 from my childhood. And Yeah, okay, the throne room sequence is probably one of the best moments of Star Wars film, and there's some striking visuals, but there's also a huge segment in the middle that I think should just be cut straight out of the film. Look, I'm not gonna dive into all the things I liked and disliked about The Last Jedi because it's been overly criticized and overly analyzed a hell of a lot since it came out, so we'll just move on. And so we come back to Solo. It's not particularly inventive or creative in the storytelling it's trying to do. It's incredibly 20th century in its styling, and it doesn't have particularly moral grey areas. We have a clear cut hero versus villain dynamic, and although our heroes are criminals and there's plenty of backstabbing along the way, Han never wavers from being the good guy. Kira even tells him and the audience as such towards the end of the film. The film never really tries to make you question anything, it doesn't really challenge you in any way, and it doesn't do anything to subvert our expectations. So in a way, what it's doing is very similar at its core to what The Force Awakens was doing, playing it safe. But the difference is that Solo introduces a heap of new planets that have never been seen on film, at least, and it produces a pretty fun heist movie narrative. I went into the movie expecting Attack of the Clones level of bad, and I never thought anyone could hold a candle to Harrison Ford's iconic performance as Han Solo, but man, Alden Ehrenreich kills it. He does a really good job of balancing playing a role that we know so well and not copying that role. A lot of the lines feel like something that a young Han Solo would say, but he never tries to imitate the way that Harrison Ford would say it. He does have the swagger down, and he does have the shooting pose down to a T. But, like I said, it never feels like he's trying to imitate Ford's performance. And the thing is, where he could come off as a cheap imitation of the Han Solo we know from the original trilogy, instead I feel like he comes off as a young and brash and overconfident version of the suave and smooth smuggler that we'll meet 10 years down the road. And yeah, ultimately, I don't think we needed Solo. I think, honestly, if we'd had an alternative anthology film following some brand new smuggler, fans probably would have taken to it more. It's always a risk when you try and mess with something so iconic, but honestly, I think this film is the best we could have gotten out of that. And the weird thing is, I was prepping myself for this film to be somewhere between awful and meh, and I left wanting a sequel, or at least like a Disney Plus TV show down the line, of young Han Solo and Chewbacca, and that's crazy to me. Alden absolutely kills it, and I want to see more of him in the Star Wars universe. But look, Solo is not a great film. It's not a challenging film, and it's not a complex film, and it's not going to go down as a landmark in science fiction cinema. What it is a fun romp through a fantastical universe that is ultimately what the original Star Wars film was, and that made me fall in love with this universe. So, that and that alone is why Solo might be the best Disney Star Wars film.